The next thing to do is to download the cats. So let's write a method called download cats. And we're going to need to pass this folder that we created. So down here, make some room for the method. So just for a moment, let me write pass so we can talk about it. Now, one possibility is I could write the logic here entirely in this method, and I could maybe write a few other methods within this program.py file, and that would solve the problem of downloading the cats from the internet and saving them to our folder. But that would make it not very easy for other people, other programs that maybe also wanted to download cats. So as we've seen in other apps, let's go and actually put this into a separate module. So we'll come over here and add another Python file. I'll call it cat service. And in the cat service, we're going to have a method. We can call it whatever we want. Let's just say something like get cat. And it's going to take a folder to save the cat to, and it's going to take a name for the cat. For now, let's just say, hold on. We're not going to write the code here, but we'll use it back in this area. So back in the program file, we'd like to call that get cat method from our cat service. So we would say something like cat service. And of course, just like any module, we have to import it. Now, we could go to the top and write import cat service, or as you see in PyCharm, we'll do that for us. Watch the line numbers change when I hit enter. There you go. At the top, it's imported cat service, just like any other module. And so now we can say get cat and pass the folder, and we're going to need to pass a name. I'm just going to leave that empty for a second. Now, before we go and implement this cat service, let's talk about how we're going to get these cats, what we're going to do with them. So we're going to get 8 cats, and let's make this configurable. So I'll create a variable called cat count, and let's set that to 8. We could make this a parameter we pass to this method, but we'll just sort of put it here locally. Now, I'd like to loop over something, and for each one of those, I'd like to go and get a cat. Well, what do I loop over? I say for I in what? So Python has a couple of cool methods that will build what are called iterables, sets that can be used in for in loops, and more Pythonic structures such as list comprehensions and so on out of just parameters. So we don't have a collection, but we can go over here and say for I in range from 1 to cat count. Now, before we get into this part, let's just do a little print and see what we get back. So this is going to return an integer. We're going to call it I. And one of the things we might ask is this going to go from 1 to 8? Maybe the endpoint is inclusive. Maybe it's sort of an upper bound but not included. Let's just do a little print I to find out. And while we're at it, let me show you another cool little trick here. So we'll run this. And you can see it's 1 to 7. So 1 to 7, actually that's not what we wanted. We want 1 to 8. So let's put a +1 for our cat count here. Excellent. Now it goes 1 to 8. But notice when I run this, it's kind of like all up and down. Like every print is a new line. So there's something you can do on the print statements where you configure the endings. So I can come down here and I can say end equals, normally the end is like a \n, a new line character, but I can say the end is just going to be a comma with a space. And now when I run it, we actually just print these out on one line separated by a comma and a space. Okay, so it looks like we got the right number of cats working. Now the next thing to do is to come up with a name. So that should be pretty easy. We won't be too creative here. We'll just call this, let's call it lolcat underscore, and here we'll just put the number like lolcat underscore 1, lolcat underscore 2, and so on. So we'll do a format, and then we'll do I. So let's pass this name along here. All right, so that should be everything we need to do to download the lolcat from the program file. Now we just have to implement the details of catservice.getCat. Now, before we move on to writing catservice.getCat, notice there's some squigglies here, and PyCharm is actually telling us lolcat is a misspelled word. So PyCharm will actually find spelling errors in variables, in methods, in strings, and so on. So let me just put a string here. It says, I went to the house and misspell house here. So I can actually go over here in PyCharm and hit Alt-Enter, and it will say, you know what, that word is misspelled. Maybe you should use house. And it'll do similar stuff for parameters, for methods, and so on. And that's really cool. Sometimes there's a word that is actually the correct word, but, you know, PyCharm doesn't believe in lolcats. So we need to tell it, like, hey, this is a properly spelled word. So I can come over here and say, save lolcat to my dictionary, which is just a local file that's associated with your PyCharm project. And now it won't give me a little squiggly and say there's something wrong. So this spelling correction stuff is really nice. I actually find it super helpful for when I've misspelled a method, especially if it's in like a public API or something. All right, let's write the first part of this get cat method. So the first thing we're going to have to do is get the cat from the internet, and we're going to return it as some kind of data, a binary stream or a byte array or something like this. So we'll write a method called get data from URL. And this method could actually be used to get binary data from any URL. It doesn't have to be just cats. Come up with a URL parameter here. So we'll say the URL is, and I happen to know a URL that we can use that will return a random lolcat. So here we have this web service, and we're going to call it, and it will return a small set of random lolcats. And so we're going to pass this here. Now, obviously, this method doesn't exist, so let's go write it. So let's do what we've done before and use the request package from PyPI to download the data from this URL. So we'll say response equals requests. Now, again, request is an external package. We've already installed it with pip, but we still need to import it at the top of this file. That's easy enough to do. And then we can do a get, and we'll pass the URL. On the response object, we have a raw, and the raw item is just the binary stream of data that we want to work with. So we can return this to the caller, and then they can go save it or work with it in memory, whatever they want to do with that data. Now, it turns out this is almost right. There's actually a problem with this, even though it might be the most straightforward way of thinking about doing it. And we're going to come back and fix that. But first, let's move on and talk about saving this binary data to a file.